Now, we can also compare Noah's Ark, the whole Noah's Ark story, with the Greek mythology of Deucalion, who is Prometheus' son, and Pyrrha. So the story goes, Zeus wanted to flood the world because the people was evil when they didn't worship the gods the way they were supposed to. But Prometheus tells his son Deucalion about the flood because they were supposed to be spared from it, and they build an ark. Same kind of story as Noah's Ark. The whole question is, which one came first? But like I said, it's not going to matter because when we finish with this video, everything is going to be done. But there's a more symbolic story or parable to the Old Testament than just these Greek mythologies. So now we see that the Greeks gave the Hebrews their language. They gave them their doctrine. It compares with Greek mythology. So what happened? The Greeks got them to believe in this doctrine so much that the Hebrews actually believed a Messiah or a warrior was going to come and lead them to victory against the Roman Empire. So when they rebelled and that did not happen, then what? We know that Titus went and tore down their temple, tore down their hope, tore down. Went in there, took everything out of there, including their religious writings, took it out. We know somebody hid the Dead Sea Scrolls, so maybe they hid some other doctrine as well somewhere. But we know Rome came through there burning everything that they can find, but they had those sacred documents. So with the help of Josephus, they had to give the Hebrews a new doctrine. And this is how your Bible came to be, or your New Testament. But they also revamped the Old Testament before they added the New Testament, hundreds of years later. Now, one of the main people you have to note when you're researching the Bible is Paul, especially when it comes to the New Testament, since his epistles dominate more than half of the New Testament. Now, Paul was a Jew. Now, we don't know if Paul actually existed or not, but we know that Luke is credited with writing Acts, the book of Acts, which speaks about Paul's life. Now, Paul was a Jew, and he basically was going through Jerusalem preaching against Christianity. So he was telling the Jews not to convert, when supposedly, he got a vision from Jesus and Jesus gave him a message or whatever. But in any case, Paul was arrested and he was taken to Rome, and he died in Rome under Nero. Eusebius actually says that he was beheaded under Nero, but we don't know what happened to Paul or if he even existed. Scholars debate whether he existed or not. And the whole weird thing about Paul is he wrote so much, and there should be so much more on him if he wrote this much of the gospel. Now, he also wrote, weirdly, the book of Titus and the book of Romans. Now, we know about Titus Flavius, Caesar, who's basically the one who I was telling you gave you your Bible or the New Testament. So it's weird that he wrote those two books as well as many other books in the New Testament. So when you think about that, think he wrote Titus. Titus was the Caesar, after Vespasian died after Nero. So you had Nero, Vespasian, Flavius. When he died, then Titus took over. This is the time that him and Josephus supposedly had put together this Bible with the help of a few other people. So it's weird that he would write Titus and put that in there. And it's weird that Romans is in there. This stuff you got to think about. So if the Romans and Greeks didn't write this Bible, if this book came from somewhere else, why did we have the book of Romans in there? We got the book of Titus in there. We got Acts talking about these people having something to do with the Roman Empire, with the Greek Empire. You got to put this stuff together. It's not hard once you start doing the research. Now, Paul is very important because when you start reading what Paul wrote, Paul basically gives it away. So it's hard for me to believe, one, that they would kill Paul, especially if he wrote all this and he knew all this information. So, what scholars believe happened if Paul did live or if Paul was real, scholars believe that maybe they did catch Paul, they interrogated Paul, got some information from him, and then they beheaded him. But it wasn't that, Paul supposedly, saw Jesus and was converted and started preaching good stuff and all of a sudden wrote all these gospels and everything, but he got beheaded for what? We don't know because they don't tell us why he got beheaded. So I believe, as well as other scholars believe, he was beheaded immediately. after they interrogated him. Now, I'm going to talk about Paul a lot more later because, like I said, Paul is a key. But we're going to get into Paul a little bit here. But something you need to understand is, one, remember I was talking about the Jews basically had their Old Testament. And the Old Testament said that a warrior was going to come and was going to lead them to a rebellion against Rome, and it was going to win. But remember, that didn't happen. They lost to Rome. So now that they lost, they like, okay, so what's up with the gospel? Is the gospel bullshit? What's going on? Now, if you are controlling the people by using the gospel, then of course, now that the gospel is not fulfilled and people may be losing faith in it, you got to give them a new gospel or a new covenant. Remember, they had the old covenant from Moses before. They need a new covenant because obviously whatever was said, because we don't have those old books, whatever was said in there was not fulfilled. So now it's like, okay, well, we controlled them before with a gospel. We got to give them a new gospel to control them with. Now, when you look at Hebrews 8, 5 through 10, it's talking about this. This is called Hebrews, talking to the Hebrew people, basically telling them what happened. Because see, Rome, they got to give them a new Messiah. They got to give them a new covenant. But they said, we ain't going to make the same mistake that the Greeks made, giving them a warrior and saying that a warrior going to come and this and that. This is why Jesus comes, and Jesus is, turn the other cheek, love thy neighbor, peaceful this, calm that, to calm the people down, because we ain't going to tell them a warrior going to come because they might go crazy again and try to kill us. So we're going to give them nice, calm, gentle Jesus and, give them a new covenant and explain to them what happened and why it didn't work before, because they got to control the people. Now, when you look at Hebrews, let's take a look at Hebrews 8, 5 through 10. It's basically telling you, and it says, who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to take the tabernacle. For see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern shewed to thee in the mount. So basically what they're saying is, what I was telling you up in the mount, what God was telling Moses in the mount about the laws and this and that, you're supposed to go about that the way I showed it to you. Now, he's going to explain to the Hebrews, what they're trying to explain to the Hebrews in this verse is, y'all didn't do that. Y'all messed up somewhere. So it says in 6, but now have he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. So he's saying that, okay, well, Moses basically is, the mediator of the Old Testament. He won't give it to y'all, this and that. But let's look what he says in 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for a second. So he's saying the first covenant from God to Moses was fault. It was a fault in it. Something was wrong, or they did something wrong. Now it says, for finding fault with them, he saith, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant. Something went wrong. Y'all didn't listen. And I regarded them not, save the Lord. For this is the new covenant, or this is the covenant. Basically, it should say new covenant. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, save the Lord. I will put my laws in their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. Now, what happened? Now, you got the Old Testament is basically Jews is the chosen people, set apart from everybody else. The Jews are special, set apart, the Israelites. Everybody else is Gentiles, and you got the Jews. But now that didn't happen. They lost the war with Rome. The whole Messiah thing was messed up. But here they're trying to convince the Jews in Hebrews, in the book of Hebrews, that it's your fault. Y'all didn't keep the covenant, something went wrong, so God got to give y'all a new covenant, and God basically turning y'all back on y'all, saying that I'm going to be a God, y'all going to be a people. So when people always ask that question, they say, well, how come in the Old Testament that God was coming down and he was talking to the people and God was doing this and he was interacting with the people. God was actually speaking to the people. How come that's not happening no more? But it's giving you the clue here. It's trying to tell the people that God's saying he just going to be God now and y'all just going to be people. So I'm not coming down to speak to y'all no more. I'm not doing the stuff that I did with the old covenant, helping y'all out with the wars and this and that. But we got to remember, this is all bullshit because the stuff never happened. It's just stories that they thought happened. So they also reading these stories saying that, God helped them with the war and, gave them this and that. And Moses and them had the Ark of the Covenant. So, God gonna get it to us. So, of course, a lot of the Jews will have doubts because they had this doctrine. And the doctrine said that a Messiah was going to come and save them and all this and that, lead them to war. And it was going to defeat Rome. But that didn't happen. So, of course, you had a lot of the Hebrews, losing faith. So when the New Testament came out, they had to put the book of Hebrews in there and explain to the Hebrews what's going on, what happened. Y'all messed up. Y'all did something wrong. This is why we got to have a new covenant. So y'all got to follow this Christ. And he's talking about peace and all this and that. So this is why I said it's no way somebody like Jesus could have been walking around through Jerusalem during the time when the Jews were so geared up on their doctrine and ready for rebellion. That's actual real history that actually happened. They led a rebellion against Rome, and it was because of their doctrine. That's real history. So there's no way in real life somebody like Jesus could have been walking around saying, no, turn the other cheek, peace, when everybody is geared up for war. So the book of Hebrews is telling the Jews, y'all messed up somewhere and y'all didn't pay attention. Jesus was walking around trying to tell y'all, but y'all crucified them and, putting the blame on them, not making it look like Rome was to any fault, but y'all messed up. Y'all killed the man who was trying to save y'all. So now this is what he was saying, and y'all need to listen to him and pay attention to his gospel. So they had to throw that in there. But, back to Paul. Paul, I'm going to get into a lot more later, but I'm talking a little bit now. But Paul is basically saying, because remember, Paul started out preaching against the New Testament. He was talking against, converting to this whole Christianity. So it's hard to believe that Paul would just convert that fast. But Paul, when you read his writings, is trying to tell you, like, what are y'all doing? What's going on? What are y'all talking about? Now, if you go to 1 Corinthians 1:20-24, I'm going to start reading from there. And he's basically saying in verse 20, he says, where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Have not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? Now understand that he's basically saying, where is your common sense at? Come on, think about this. Where's the wise people? Where's the scribes? Because scribes are smart. Where's the disputer? Why ain't nobody disputing this stuff? What's going on? And he said, had not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? But the God he's talking about is not God. He's talking about Caesar. And I'm explaining that. Now, something you have to understand about Paul is he's a Hellenist. Now, remember, the Hellenization of Israel was going on under the Greeks. So when the Romans took over the Greeks, Hellenization would not only benefit the Greeks, but Rome as well. But he was a Hellenist. And if Paul was for Christianity and all that, his writings will definitely show you that he was not really for Christ. So, you just got to read it. Now, later on, I will show you what a lot of if you do read the Bible, if you do know what Paul's talking about, and you don't know the premise, if you don't know the key, the secret, the code, I'm going to explain that later, because Paul is giving you everything you need to know. If you just pay attention to what Paul and Jesus says in the Bible, they go hand in hand. They basically telling you the same thing, but it's not what you think it is. It's not what is said on the surface. But I'm going to explain that later. We're going to get into that. But Paul's a Hellenist. So understand that first. Now, another thing is this. A lot of the times, I'm going to go through this later as well. A lot of the things you need to understand when they're speaking of God, a lot of the times in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, they are also speaking of the Caesar. Remember, the Caesar was by law to be called God. The problem was they could not get the Jews to call the Caesar God or worship him as God. But everybody who was under the Caesar was calling him God. So you got to know when they're referring to the Caesar or when they're referring to the God, to actual God. But that's hard to know when you read in the Bible, because what God are they speaking of. But that's one of the keys, one of the clues to the Bible is to know who they are calling God. And the only way you would know who they are calling God is if you know these people, if you know about Josephus, if you know about Paul, if you know about the people who represented Rome. That's the only way you would know. And if you know what's really going on, you can figure out who they're talking about. So in some cases, they're talking about actual God, and in other cases, they're talking about Titus, the Caesar. So now let's go back. Let's look at this. Let me finish reading it. Verse 21, it says, "For after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe." Now think about that. Think about what it just said. Now who could he be talking about? It sounds more like he's talking about Titus, the Caesar, than actual God. I'm gonna read it again. "For after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. For the Jews require a sign, and the Greeks seek after wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, unto the Jews a stumbling block, but unto the Greeks foolishness." Think about that. "But unto them which are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God." So now let's look at this again. Let me explain this, because when you know that he's speaking about Titus and not about the actual God, then this makes a lot more sense. So when it says, "For after that, in the wisdom of Titus, the world by wisdom knew not God." So basically he's saying, if I told you who God is or what's really going on, the wisdom of it, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't understand it. So I see that by the foolishness of preaching, that I can save you that actually believe in God by preaching it to you. This is going to make a lot more sense later, and we're going to come back and refer to this. So it's saying clearly, this is talking about Titus. He's saying, "For after that, in the wisdom of God, and the wisdom of Titus, the world by wisdom knew not God." So I can tell you all day what the true God is and what's going on. I can give you supreme mathematics and all that. I could talk to you about energy and everything. You wouldn't understand it. The people wouldn't know. But it pleased Titus by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. I'm going to make a lot more sense later. Now it says, "For the Jews require a sign, and the Greeks seek after wisdom." So, okay, I'm going to give the Jews a sign. I'm going to give the Greeks wisdom, because both of them are in the Bible. We're going to go through it later. "But we preach Christ crucified, unto the Jews a stumbling block." Because, come on, you can't go through this Bible and you reading it and then you just, you stumbling over what the hell is it talking about? It's the way it's written is so confusing, so many contradictions. It's a stumbling block. "And unto the Greeks, foolishness." Because the Greeks look at this shit like, come on, this is the same stuff we told them back when we gave them the Old Testament with the whole Greek mythology. It's foolishness. "But unto them which are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God." Because it's both the power of God and the wisdom of God. And it's going to make a lot more sense later when I get into this whole part. But Paul is a major key. And I'm telling you, you're going to see later how much Paul reveals in this book. and Jesus as well, because Jesus keeps telling you, he's telling you 1,000 times to listen to him, but you're not listening to him. He's giving you the clue. He's telling you everything. So is Paul. But preachers have twisted it around, and you yourself you didn't listen to Jesus, and you twisted it around, and now you're all stuck in Christianity and foolishness. So I'm gonna break you out of it later on, and when you see what's really being said, you're gonna feel stupid, some of you, because it's right in front of your face. But we're gonna get into it later. So now this is gonna bring me all the way up to, because I have to show you that not only does the New Testament parallel the Old Testament, because we're gonna go through that, but they had to figure out a way. You gotta remember, they making this stuff up. So they had to go and steal from different deities, which is why Jesus paralleled so many Krishna and so many other Greek gods and so many other Hindu gods and stuff like that. Because they had to go and find somebody to create this new Messiah to parallel him off. So they paralleled them with a lot of different people. So yeah, I just gave you a lot of history. I just gave you a lot of dates and a lot of events that you can all go and research for yourself. Research all of this stuff. But we still have to answer the question, why did Rome not give us Codex Vaticanus? Why did Sinaiticus not get found until the 1800s, meaning it wasn't included in the King James Version? You know, why didn't they give us Alexandrinus or Ephraem Rescriptus? Why did they sit on these manuscripts for so long? Why wasn't it until 1546 that the Latin Vulgate became the official Bible of Rome? Why? What was going on? So I still have to answer that question, but I have to go into Kemet now. We got to go into Kemet because you got to understand, I got to continue the story about the New Testament, because you got to realize that the concepts of the New Testament, the concept of Jesus Christ, comes from Kemet. This is where it all is at for you Christians. This is what it's all about, what Jesus said, you know, not being in sin and all these rules and this and that. This is what it's about. So these concepts, even going back to the Old Testament, when we look at the Ten Commandments, these concepts come from Kemet. And when you do the research, you'll see a lot of religions got their concepts from Kemet. So we know it was a lot of religious groups that worship the sun in different ways, but we know Kemet is where that started at. It's the earliest place we can find the sun worship. And we also know the oldest religious texts are in Kemet. So I want to go back. I want to go to the first video of this video so far. I've been doing a lot of talking, but I had to give you that history. So I hope y'all still watching. But now we're going to go to the first video, and we're going to go to Aswa Quasi, who's basically been taking people to Kemet, you know, since the 90s. He was a student of Dr. Ben, and you know, we just lost Dr. Ben I think yesterday. And you know, we're gonna miss Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben definitely was the first person I looked to when I started doing this research on Kemet, you know, and comparing it to the Bible. So, you know, rest in peace, Dr. Ben. We definitely gonna miss him. And it's a shame that so many people know who Cookie is. So many black people know who Cookie from Empire is, but they don't know who Dr. Ben is. And that's crazy. I mean, a lot of people was asking me, sending me messages on Facebook saying, well, who's Dr. Ben, or who was this guy? You know, it's crazy. They didn't know. People don't know who Dr. Ben is, and he done so much for black people. And it's crazy. So, you know, rest in peace, Dr. Ben. But Aswa Quasi been taking people to Kemet for years, and he been just blowing up the Bible for a long time. So we're going to go and look at some videos of Aswa Quasi giving you, telling you, first of all, one, where Rome went and wrote their book. Because, like I said, we're going to find out where this Bible was written at. And we can go all the way back to Kemet, and we can find out they wrote it right there in Kemet. So let's look at what Aswa Quasi has to say about that.
Our story has been persecuted, and persecuted in a way that we look at it from a European perspective. And what I'm trying to say is that the pyramid right here in Giza, the Great Pyramid of Khufu, this pyramid is 7 million tons of masonry. 2,300,000 stones put in exact position. Why do I say that? Because we are told that the pyramids are made out of mud and straw. Now, you are right here at the pyramids. The outer casing of these pyramids are 5 tons each, and the inner casing are 50 tons each. This pyramid of Khufu is built in the 4th dynastic period. There were no people at this particular time called Jews who built the pyramids, and definitely not Machen Begin. Machen Begin is an Ashkenazi Jew from Poland, and he stood here right where you are now and said his people built the pyramids. But he's able to tell the world that because of the power that they have inflicted upon other people to force that story on other people. This is what African people have done. And even today, they try to figure out all kinds of means of how the pyramids were built. Even the Japanese came here, the Nippon Corporation, and tried to build the pyramids, and it collapsed. In fact, science called geodesics. Geodesics is the landmass of the center of the earth. You know, the pyramid is built right in the center of the earth on a perfect northeast-southwest direction due to the North Star. Now you can see all three pyramids. Now on the further back is the pyramid of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure. Keep in mind, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors had astronomical science, astrology, where they studied the stars and so forth. One of the things that's been brought to astronomers' attention is that they noticed that the pyramid of Khufu and Khafra, if you notice right here, are in a perfect alignment. Okay? It's a perfect alignment. But the question is that why would such a perfect alignment and perfect structure where they built the small pyramid of Menkaure off course? Can you see it off course? Yeah. But what they found, though, is that our ancestors were building the pyramids in alignment with the stars, that they were in rhythm with the astrology and the astronomical science of the universe, the science of astrology or the study of the stars. And what they found is that the star system Orion was the star system of Osiris. Remember, the king wants to become one with Osiris. So by aligning the pyramid of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure with Orion, and that's why they built the pyramid of Menkaure slightly over and not in alignment, because the pyramids were built off of the alignment of the star system Orion. So you can take and put the star system Orion right over the pyramid of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure and see why they had the alignment of Menkaure slightly over, because it fit with the star system Orion, because the purpose was for the soul to ascend into heaven, for the spirit to ascend into heaven, to become one with Osiris. And the star system Orion was connected with Osiris. Tomorrow when you go into Saqqara, you're also going to see the pyramid of Unas, showing the first concept of ascension into heaven. Long before there was Christianity, long before there were little white angels with wings on there, that we get a concept that we're going to go to heaven. Unas already had the concept of ascension into heaven, or a spirit going into heaven, known as astrotheology. So this is what our ancestors saw, the soul becoming one with the great god Osiris in the constellation of Orion, which was the symbol for Osiris. And the star system Ceres was for Isis. Powerful astronomical knowledge that our ancestors had, showing how in tune our ancestors were with the heavenly bodies. In essence, building heaven on earth. Even in the Hermetic text, it speaks of Asar is our father in heaven, and he looked down on his kingdom that he built. Hold this before me. So let me show you something here. This is the kingdom. This is Asar in Orion's belt now. See Asar in Orion's belt, looking down on his kingdom? In Amos in the Bible, it speaks of, seek of him who is of the star, the 7 stars of Orion. Right here, this is where it started. That was taken from the Hermetic text of your ancestors long before the Ptolemies got the Jews to write the Bible, and the first European Bible was written right here in Egypt. And it was Ptolemy Philadelphus who got them to write for them, which they copied it from the pyramid text of our African ancestors. You have to go to your temples for proof and validation and research and see the temples. It says the carving from the temples of Ipidasut, Karnak is called today. Sahu Nepet, Orion was Lord of the heavens. So here we see that this is Sahu, this is Neb, and this is Pet. So our ancestors saw Orion was Lord of the heavens. They carved it on the temples, but why did they put it there? That's what we want to look at. They saw, as we go back to the scriptures, we're going to bring the scriptures in the court of law. Well, is it in the scriptures? Yes, it's in the scriptures. In Amos, chapter 5, verse 8, it says, seeketh him that maketh the 7 stars of Orion. Uh-oh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Seeketh him that maketh the 7 stars of Orion. Well, our ancestors saw that Asar, our spiritual father, and the Zep Tepi, for our spirit to go back to him, to rise up our caress, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the constellation of Orion long before it was in Amos and the scriptures was even in existence. This is the Zep Tepi, or the first time of creation. Our ancestors saw through the constellation, through the heavenly body, through astrotheology, through the cosmos, the first divine mother and father for them to live for eternity. A set represented Sahu, called Ceres today, and Asar represented Orion. Our spiritual mother and father that we carved on the temples. Here we see the earliest story of Asar, who had an evil brother named Set. Many versions of the story, who got 72 conspirators to crucify him. Here we see this is long before the Cain and Abel story. You got it carved on the temples. And although you see it carved on the temples on the outside, still on the inside, they're still beautifully painted black. It's through this story of the union of Asar and Asar's resurrection, through the union of Asar and Aset, they have a holy child. It's told on the papyruses where the name paper came from. We see Tahuti, we did not worship animals, but Tahuti, the divine nectar, the messenger corresponding to Gabriel in the gospel, announces to the goddess Aset that she give a divine immaculate conception and virgin birth. So here you had this spiritual story where Tahuti came, who was a spiritual law, said Aset would have a holy child. This is long before Gabriel, the angel of the Lord, came through the back door and told Mary that she was going to have an immaculate conception. Now, our story was more spiritual because Tahuti gave the call, and Amun came to Asar and said that your wife Aset would have an immaculate conception. Now, I don't know about you, brother, but if your wife came to you and said an angel of the Lord in the back room came and said that she had an immaculate conception, I don't know if you go for it or not. I don't know. But that's belief. On these temples, right here, Dendera, at the temple of Het Heru, let's go inside these temples, brothers and sisters, and going inside these temples, here we can see an ancient spiritual story where Asar, here we see he's born in a manger. But one of the things that I make sure of is that we get accounts that's not going to be revealed to tour groups who come through here. That's what I tried to do. Reveal the information that normally would be passed by and not even mentioned to many of the Europeans because it would conflict with their European Western world through their own European white supremacy thinks that everything started with them, or think that their whole European Christian concept started with them. This is a Torah book. It's good to pick these little books up. And it's written by the Mormons. The Mormons who write these books. The Mormons. Okay? But the Mormons are heavily into Kemet. Now, this is a chapel. This chapel is where Haru was born, in a manger, at December the 25th. Okay? Now, here's the book. Let me read it. You have the book? That's page 18. Here's the chapel, right where you are. Is that the same chapel? Yes. Okay, you see where I have yellow there, right? Right. Okay, so let me read it. This court and chapel, from a special unit within the great temple, they were used for the celebration of the day of the child in his cradle, a festival commemorating the birth of Horus, which, coming as it did at the close of the Egyptian year, offers a curious resemblance to the Christian festival of Christmas. How could it be a curious resemblance when this predates European Christianity? What was the symbol of this temple right here? What zoomorphic form? Cow. The cow. Now, have you often wondered why the cow is always in the manger? Yeah. This is Hathor right here with the cow's ears that looked over Haru in his birth at December the 25th. Here you see a pictorial version of their painting of the European Jesus wrapped up like the mummy that was called the Carissing, that we'll get into in the lecture series, showing you right here, why is it a cow? No one had never asked, why is the cow in the manger? Because the cow was Het Heru. And where Haru was born in the manger, this was his surrogate mother, the cow. That the cow symbolically plays the surrogate mother over the European pictorial versions of the Bible that we have right here.